Richard Calhoun, Creekside Realty. We're here to discuss Silicon Valley and the Greater Bay Area real estate market. It's 9 o'clock Saturday morning. We'll come back to this slide in a little bit. Here's what we're going to be doing starting off. This is DUI, days on market, 75th percentile, list price to original list price. These are the price reductions that sellers take before they get an offer accepted. 90 percentile, the average overbid. This is what the buyers overbid when they write their offer trying to get the property. This is the frequency of buyers overbidding. This is the appreciation since the 9-month period of time of April 2015 through December of 2015. And then we have the sold price. And here we have the 10 percentile, the median, the 50 percentile, and the 90 percentile. The colors assigned by the median price. And that way you know the range of price in any given area. Here's the first heat maps. This is showing days of unsold inventory. This is, to me, the key indicator. It's how quickly it would take to sell the existing inventory at the existing rate of sales. The faster the marketplace, the lower the number is. So the fastest number I think I saw in here was down here at 15 days in Fremont. That's a very fast marketplace. We're in a very unusual market in the fact that the market's quick pace, but with very limited inventory and very limited offers. And when those two things are in balance, but on the limited side, which gives you a fast-paced marketplace with not a lot of choice. Here is DUI, since it's a key indicator over time. The current week today, March 25th, is over on the right-hand side, and you can see you go back every week. Now, if you really look at this, the colors are changing a little bit from micro-market area to micro-market area, but there really hasn't been much change. It's been basically fluctuation for the last couple of weeks, but we're, like if you come back here, it was clearly paler, or if you come back here, it was clearly paler. Beginning of the part of the year was sort of very pale, and it went darker and darker red. And the last 4 or 5 weeks has probably been fairly constant with some fluctuation between the different micro market areas. Here's moving on to days on marketplace. This is the 75th percentile. This is what I call sort of the long typical seller. 25% of the sellers do take longer, but 75% of the sellers take less time than this. And if you look at this, most of these times are somewhere right around 2 weeks. For 75% of your sellers to get an offer that's acceptable within 2 weeks of going on the marketplace is pretty amazing, and that's the hot marketplace we're in. From 7 days to 45 days is some shade of red in color. From 45 days to 115 days is some shade of blue in color. The slowest that I'm seeing is the San Mateo County coast at 49 days. That is actually a little bit of shade of blue. In fact, you can sort of see it right here on the table index. But when you come over here, I guess you can see it because there's a difference color in the green from San Gregorio to Half Moon Bay. Just going over this little line here is where the zip code for Half Moon Bay is, and that's showing a little bit of blue. Now we're moving on to the ask price reductions. This is where the seller takes a reduction in their asking price from their original asking price before an offer is accepted. This is the 90 percentile, and that's a little bit of extreme, but the reason I'm doing that is if you do anything less, a good part of the time it's 100%, and it gives you no indication of what the market is. Basically, a seller taking up to an 8.5% reduction, 91.5%, would become saturated. So from 91.5 to 99 is some sort of shade of blue. From 99 to 100% is a shade of red. Very condensed going up, and that's only because you don't go over 100% very often, and the price reductions really aren't that significant, which tends to indicate that agents are able to get sellers to price their home at about where the market is for the given market conditions. But you can see some of your expensive areas in San Mateo County here are at 89%, so that's going to be saturated red, but you can also see a fair number of these sellers are at 100%. So that means less than 10% of the sellers are taking any reduction whatsoever. In Dublin, Castro Valley, and Livermore, 90% of the sellers are taking less than 0.4% price reduction. Only 10% of the sellers are taking more than a 0.4% price reduction. And that just gives you an idea of how strong the marketplace is as far as price, or how sensitive it is as price. And this is your overbid. This is looking at the sale price that comes in compared to the asking price at the time. The disadvantage of this indicator is you have to wait for escrow to close. And again, you can see the numbers are pretty close. You can see at Berkeley and City of Alameda are up here at almost 118%. So sellers are getting almost 20% more than they're asking for their property. In Oakland, they're getting 12% more. Those are the two hot spots, and they have been for quite a while. A lot of the areas are right around 100%. The expensive areas in San Mateo Mateo County are 2% below, and South County is 1% below at 99%. This is the frequency of overbidding. How common is overbidding? You can see it's very uncommon in the expense varies in San Mateo County, with only just slightly over 20% of the sellers getting more than their asking price. Different areas might think that 20% of the sellers getting more than their asking price is pretty good, but my normal range for the Greater Bay Area is from a third to half the sellers are getting their asking price is what I consider to be a normal marketplace. So you have to get over half the sellers getting more than their asking price to be into what I call a strong seller's marketplace. But again, you can see these numbers. A lot of them are basically from about 35% up to about 55%, about a 20% range, and the color is assigned by what the percentage is. And again, you have to be above 50 before you get pink. So these areas in Santa Clara County and most of Alameda County, more than 50% of the sellers are getting above their asking price, but it's not significantly above 50. I mean, you got 60. We already talked about Berkeley and Oakland, but you got 60, you got 58, you got 51, 55. You got 48, you got 53, it looks like 54, you got a 63. So, it's not runaway stuff like we were saying before at 95% of the sellers getting more than their asking price. Here's the appreciation since 2015 on a percentage basis. You can see that the more affordable areas tend to have the more higher appreciation on a percentage basis. That's just because of the recent market, and I think it's more the people moving further away from their work center because of not needing to go into work every single day, 5 days a week any longer. This is the sold price. Again, you have the 10 percentile, the cheapest 10% in a given area, the median for that given area, and then the most expensive 90% for the given area. You can see that as you move south and east, the prices basically are more affordable than as you get to the center part of the valley. And the center part of the valley is where the expense is, not up along the peninsula, which is a bit of a shift over the last several years. Now, here's a recap. We already looked at this, and now this is what we've already gone over. We've gone over the DUI, and here you can see the different areas just in a tabular form. DUI is at 155. That's by far the longest time frame. So we take 155 days, or basically 5 months, to sell all the homes in Menlo Park, Atherton, Portola Valley, but yet they're only on the market for 40 days. What's that telling you? It's telling you that there's going to be some sellers that are on the market that are just sitting, but the people that do sell are able to come on the market and sell pretty quickly. In fact, it's sort of interesting that the San Mateo County coast, Half Moon Bay, for example, is a longer time on the market at 49 days, so 10 days longer, which is basically 20% longer, but their days of unsold inventory is, almost a third. So you wouldn't expect that, but that just gives you an idea that these benchmarks are all different, and it's important to have some understanding of what you're really looking at. This is the sale price to list price ratio. This is the 90 percentile. So again, you can see a lot of the areas are red. Some of the areas that are blue are still pretty good, up around 95%. Again, the expense varies at 99%. The average overbid, this is where you put everybody in a blender. What's the typical overbid? And you can see almost all the areas are above 100%, which is hard to say. It's a buyer's marketplace if on average the sellers are getting more than they're asking for their property. The frequency of overbidding, the appreciation since 2015, and finally the price. This is just a recap of the heat maps that we went over already. Now we're moving over to the overbidding. So this is a little different. This is looking at Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County single-family homes and duet homes. And we're looking at 5-week data, but it's new data every week. This week is the last 5 weeks. Last week would have been 1 week ago to 6 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago would have been the second week back through 7th week back. So it's a moving 5-week average, and it's looking at the sale price to list price ratio of the offers that are closing. So lagging again by about 5 weeks from when the market conditions were negotiated. The red up means that the market's improving. Down blue means that the market's decreasing or getting worse. When they're both there, you're at a plateau. It's hard to see. This top red line is actually a dashed line. If you look up here, you can see the blue dots are not filling in the gaps, so you can see it stashed here. That's the best week we had ever, which for Silicon Valley was March 29th, 2022. This blue dashed line at the bottom is the worst week we ever had, which was November 30th of 2001, shortly after the World Trade Center. And with that, we'll step through. So there you can see basically flat. Now you're stepping down 9 months ago, 8 months ago, 7 months ago, 6. Now you're at a plateau for a little bit, 5 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 months ago decrease. Now we're at a new plateau, 11 weeks, 10 weeks, 9 weeks, 8 weeks, 7 weeks. Now we're going to start improving. And now the next week's an improvement, but next week going out 1 week is basically, I should have brought in the plateau. I left it as an up marketplace because it's only 3 out of the 7 days, so it could go up, and it looked like it was slightly higher. It's hard to tell based on just 3 out of 7 days. But basically, you can see that the market went down, plateaued, went down, plateaued, came up, and maybe, and most likely based on other data, is about ready to reach a new plateau. The other data I'm talking about is the fact that days on unsold inventory has leveled off the last several weeks, would tend to indicate that the pressure the buyers are feeling is probably leveled off 3 or 4 weeks ago. So in a week or two, the sale price to overbidding will probably be leveling off. It could be next week. Now we're back to the first slide. The green is what I call my root URL. That gets you the presentation on YouTube, the archive. If you add in the year 2023, you get to the live presentation Saturday morning. If you add in H for handout, the year 2023, the month 03, and the day 25, you get the handout. It did get posted about 10 minutes before the presentation. My goal is 15. I don't always make it. Some weeks I have issues and I don't get it up at all, but it is up for this week if you want to go look at the data. If you want a specific presentation, you just type in the year, month, date code after the green URL. I am open for any questions, and my contact information is down below. Not seeing anyone unmuting themselves, and from this point on, just shout out during the presentation if you have any questions. We're now looking at active inventory. The next several slides are all the same. We're looking at Silicon Valley, the single-family homes, and duet homes. It should not include condos and townhouses. The blue line is always going to be a cold marketplace condition, and that's based on the 10 percentile or the 90 percentile, depending on which market indicator you're looking at. The red is the reverse, the 90 or the 10, depending on what market, but it's always a hot marketplace. The black or gray line in the middle is the median. That's where you'd expect the market to be if we were having a typical year, and that's based on 10 years. So we're looking at the most recent 10 years in the past mirror. We're taking the 10 and 90 percentile. That gives you the two outlying numbers, and the middle number is the median. And then the purple is always the current data. The current data right now is down here, and you can see we have a fairly limited inventory. We only have 1,500 homes for the market, and the red line, so the fewest number of homes that we've really ever had in the past 10 years is 1,400. We have almost a record low number of homes available, so buyers do not have a lot of choice. Now we're looking at the number of offers. Likewise, the number of offers is very low, and in this case, it's actually below our previous low. And the previous low is actually the 10 percentile, so you will have a year lower than that, and that's basically this year. So this is basically, for this time of the year, having a record low number of sales. And basically, the only year that's close to that is the pandemic. And at this point in the pandemic, we weren't allowed to sell houses anymore. Some transactions fell out of escrow that were in escrow. You had an impact immediately of some failed sales, and then we weren't able to add, and that's why we came down. But we're basically lower, in my opinion, and you can come back here and try to read the graph. It's pretty darn close, because here's your vertical line, and the vertical line is April 1st. You're up here, and we're right now on March 25th, so we're not quite to the vertical line because the vertical lines are quarters, and you're lower than you were in 2020. We're selling fewer homes now without a pandemic announcement than we did in 2020. This is looking at days of unsold inventory. Again, this to me is the major benchmark. It tells you how quick the market's going, and in a free economy, supply and demand, that's what it is, a supply-demand ratio, and in a free economy, the supply-demand ratio determines what's going to happen to the future price. And because we have record low inventory and record low number of sales, we basically have a typical market as far as the speed. We're having an absolute normal market as far as the speed of the market, which in Silicon Valley is a fast marketplace, but we're doing that with very few transactions. This is looking at the days on marketplace, and this is saying the days on marketplace is slow. So how do you explain the two instead of it being in the median? This is saying that there's some sellers that are coming on the marketplace and are taking a long time to sell. So part of the marketplace is moving pretty quickly. The bulk of the marketplace is moving pretty quickly, but that's starting to be that 25th percentile and that 90th percentile. It's moving slower than you would when you look at just the 75th percentile. You're basically right on top of your worst year. And again, the worst year is the 90th percentile year. So there's really 1 year worse than that. And you can sort of see that here. This year is worse than your blue line. This line happens to be exactly equal. Most of 2023 has been very equal to the slowest line. We're doing a lot of 90 percentiles. We have 3 years at 90 percentile in the last 10 years. This is the ask price reductions that the seller's taking over their asking price. Now, you have to be a little careful on this, and I did spend a little time and looked at this. I looked at every 2.5 percentile. This is the sellers, the 2.5 percentile of the sellers that are taking the largest discount, which is why it's at 97.5. And the reason I did that is even at 95%, you're spending, and I don't remember what the exact number was. It might be 18 out of 400 days or weeks at 100%. For something like 5% of the time, maybe it was 6% of the time because that sticks in my mind, you end up having no indication of what the market's doing, and that's at 95%. When you get down to 90%, I think it jumps to something like 33% of the weeks, you can't get any indication of what the market's doing. And if you want to use it as an indicator of what the market's doing, do a bigger extreme. I picked the 97.5 percentile, and you can see what's interesting, at least in my opinion, is when you look at the peak in 2022, it happened sometime before April the 1st. It happened maybe in, and I could get on the Excel spreadsheet and get the actual date here. It might have happened in March, mid-March or early March or very late February, but that was sort of the first indication that the market was changing. And look how rapidly that came down. And then we had that improvement that I basically was saying in August, and you can see here's your July 1st. So it's after July 1st, and it looks like it's basically the month of August and September improved. Then October went down, and then basically in this year you've been improving. But look, you improve every year, and right now about first quarter is when you roll over, and it looks like we may have rolled over. Time will tell. This actually looks like it's a pretty good indicator, even though you would not normally look at this for indicating what sellers are doing on price reductions. To me, it looks like it's a good indicator of when the market's changed. Now we move on to the frequency of reducing asking price. So this is what percentage of the sellers are reducing their asking price. And you can see right now only 15% of the sellers are reducing their asking price. But that's actually one of the highest percentages or one of the coolest marketplaces, which is why you're right on top of the 90 percentile line. The gray line, the typical reduction is only about 7.5%. And in the hottest marketplace, only 5% of the sellers take any sort of a price reduction on their property. 15% may sound like not a lot, but it actually is quite a bit for Silicon Valley. This is the asking price to the original, and this is the average. So this is where you're looking more at what the market's doing. And you can see right now the sellers on average are taking less than 1% price reduction. But again, that is more than we typically take, because you can see the 90 percentile is up here somewhere around 99 and 99.25%. We're down here at about 98 and 98.8 or something like that percent. About a third of a percent, maybe a half percent lower than the 90 percentile. You can see the median is up here normally at about 99.75%, and the good marketplace, the hot marketplace, is essentially at 100% at this time of the year. And that's a good way to think of these lines. The reason I put these lines are on here is to show you the seasonal cycle. Normally on graph paper, the horizontal x-axis is your reference point. When you have an indicator that has a huge annual cycle or seasonal cycle, you need to take that into consideration. So this is basically like your curved x-axis, the gray specifically, because it's your median, and then red would be slightly positive into a hot marketplace and blue would be slightly negative into a cold marketplace. Moving on to the largest asking price reductions, and this is the 2.5 percentile. So this is what 2.5 percentile how sellers are taking the biggest indicator, biggest price reduction. We looked at that before because this is showing you that it changed sometime in the month of March or February. And you can see at this time of the year, normally sellers that are taking the biggest discount are taking about 11% discount, 89%. In a hot marketplace, the 2.5 percentile that sellers that are taking the biggest discounts are taking about 5% discount. Right now, we're down here at somewhere around 87.5%. The typical seller's taking something like a 12.5% price reduction over their original asking price. This is the average asking price reduction. And again, we've already looked at this slide. This is the median overbid. So this is what half the transactions have a sold price more than 101% of the asking price and a half or below, which would also include below. And you can see that we do occasionally dip slightly below 100%. This is the average overbid. So on average, it's up around 104%. And each micro market again has its own. This is the frequency of overbidding. And you can see right now in Silicon Valley, you're somewhere around 58%. And that may sound like a huge number, but you can see you're right on the blue line. So that typically says that 90% of the time you're higher than that. The median where you'd expect it to be is at 70%. And in the best year you ever where you were up here about 82% of the sellers getting more than their asking price. This showing the sold price over time. The straight line is sort of my freehand of the best slope, but basically when you're up here, you're above the rate of appreciation that you'd expect the home to be. And right now we're below. Earlier this year, we were below by a bigger amount than we typically are. And frankly, if you look at this, a dip down at the end of the year, the beginning part of the year is very common. And that's just the end of the year holiday impact. And you can see that it's not at the end of the year. It's skewed over by about 5 weeks, and that's the lag time. It really is an end of the year impact. This is looking at the number of active listings by the county. So we're now leaving the 10 median 90 percentile graphing, and we're comparing Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County individually to each other. So you can see Santa Clara and Alameda County have roughly the same number of listings. San Mateo County, being a smaller county, has fewer. If you look back historically, Alameda County has more listings than Santa Clara, and right now they're roughly the same. So that would basically say that Alameda County has a greater shortage than Santa Clara County. This is the number of offers accepted. And if you look here, Alameda County typically, again, has more offers accepted. So it's probably just a bigger county. But now Santa Clara County has a bigger. So Santa Clara County market may have more inventory, but it's a faster paced marketplace than Alameda County. You can't really make the comparison easily with San Mateo County because it's so much smaller. It's clearly below and normally below. What you probably could do is say that it comes up to somewhere around 600, and right now it's somewhere around 300. So they're only selling about half the listings that they normally do. And for Alameda County and Santa Clara County, you might say it's about 1,250, and now it's about 650. So it's more than half. So Santa Clara and Alameda County are doing better than San Mateo County based on that graph of offers accepted. Moving on to days on sold inventory, and here you can see San Mateo County is slower. You can see Alameda County is the next, and you can see that the fastest is Santa Clara County. Exactly what I showed by sort of doing a visual representation on the offers accepted compared to the inventory. And that's because days on sold inventory is simply the supply-demand ratio. This is 75th percentile. How long is the longest typical seller taking to sell? You can see that Santa Clara County is the fastest, followed by Alameda County, followed by San Mateo. They're all pretty close together though. 18 days probably for, maybe 17 days for Santa Clara County, and maybe something like 25 days for San Mateo County. So even though San Mateo County is the slowest, for 75% of your sellers to sell in 3.5 weeks is still a pretty respectably paced marketplace. This is the list price to original list price average. Look at this huge drop in San Mateo County. It's got a huge fluctuation. I'm going to go look at my data. I don't think there's going to be anything wrong with the data. It's just, when you have a smaller sample size, you can get more statistical fluctuation. And you can see that San Mateo County is more fluctuating, more bounce to it than Alameda and Santa Clara County. But this kind of exaggerated bounce is pretty unusual. This is looking at the magnitude magnitude of the sale price to the list price. So this is the average. You can see in Santa Clara County and San Mateo County, they're right about 102%. And it's actually interesting that San Mateo County, despite being a slower marketplace, is outperforming Santa Clara County. But Alameda County is doing the best by quite a bit at about 107.5%. The sellers in Alameda County are getting about 7.5% more than their asking price, even though they're not as fast as Santa Clara County. This is the frequency of overbidding. How common is overbidding? And you can see Alameda County comes out on the top by quite a bit. At almost 70% of the sellers in the Alameda County are getting more than their asking price. Santa Clara County is at 55%, San Mateo County is at 45%. And again, these differences that you see in county level, you will see more of that at the micro market level and even greater amounts. This is looking at the logarithmic scale, and you can see that Alameda County went way up. All counties went way up, went way down, and came back up. And you can see you're below the prices you were in 2021. Santa Clara County is roughly equal to the price they were in 2021, and San Mateo County is roughly equal to the price they were in 2021. This is for people that like analog scale graph of the same slide. This is the same information put on a percentage basis, and you can see that the counties are basically very similar to each other on a percentage basis, all very close, between about 161 and about 168 maybe percent, something like that. Very close together for considering that you're looking at like an 8-year period of time. This is actual table numbers for those that like to know what the raw numbers are. Number of new listings on the week. You can see that we're overall increasing a little bit for the 3 counties. You can see the components of each county. The active inventory, you can see active inventory is growing a little bit. Silicon Valley, it's up basically 5%, with a huge increase in San Mateo County. Even Santa Clara had a significant increase. Number of offers was down about 2% overall, 1.9% in Santa Clara County to 2.6% in Alameda County. San Mateo County actually went up. DUI, an increasing DUI is a slowing marketplace. I consider 5 days to be a significant change in the marketplace. Here, 1 and 2 days, that's not a whole lot, but it's definitely been some change. Median days, average days on market. I do want to jump down to the appreciation here. It appears, and I just found this out early this morning, so I was able to correct it. It looks like I may have had a bad number. I was using a median sell price for the 3 counties, 1,100,000, and last night I did the same calculation and it came up to 1,450. So I need to try to go back and find out if there's been a dramatic change, what there shouldn't be, because I'm looking back in time and I need to find out where that 1,100 came from, but it appears that would be the reason why the combined Silicon Valley had such a greater appreciation, as I was using an incorrect number for the base year for some reason. And I need to find that out just to try to prevent it, because now it's 117%. That's in line with these other counties. I had been using that as an example of showing why it's important to look at the individual counties, but which is true, but it appears that the data I was using to use my educational moment was incorrect. Here's your sort of non-apples and apples comparison. This is through March 25th, last night, or actually March 24th, today's the 25th. Last night through the 24th at midnight, I get the data on the 25th. Some of the things that are noteworthy is the asking price at $2 million is higher than it was a year ago. But if you just come down to the list price of what's selling, it's exactly the same. But then you come down to what's selling and it's $300,000 lower. And this does not mean that the typical seller is taking a $400,000 price reduction. It means what's selling is different than what's on the marketplace. So there's a mismatch on the marketplace. And to me, the real takeaways is 28 days is a pretty fast marketplace. Yes, it's slower than the last 2 years, but it's actually faster than 19 and 20, which weren't bad years, although they were a little slow. But then you have to come all the way back to about 2017 through 2011 to get roughly the same number of days, or 2012 to get roughly the same number of days. To get higher, you have to get back to the slowdown, 2006 through 2011. And yes, I said 2006. Most people say the market slowdown started in 2007 with the mortgage meltdown, but it really started before that because, 30 days to 54 days is a pretty major slowdown. And when you look at it, 54 days, except during the major recession of the mortgage and stock market meltdowns, was actually a pretty slow marketplace. But I've been harping on this for a while. The big takeaway is the sales. You're at 729. That is higher than 2020, but that's the pandemic. If you ignore the pandemic year, it's basically the lowest we've had. And then if you come down to closings, I think we're going to be the lowest even compared to the pandemic because the closings haven't been impacted by the announcement of the pandemic in 2020 yet. So we're only closed 612 transactions, where even in 2020, we did 715, which you have a 698, you have a 721. So at 612, it's complete, it is absolutely a record low. And this is for people that want to compare apples and apples. It's February. I don't like it because it's looking too far in the rearview mirror. A little summary, we're talking about Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County. The big takeaway, in my opinion, is the record low volume of transactions. Here are your 25-year history going back, and the lowest year we had was 2008, and the last couple of weeks it was 2020 because of the pandemic. We are lower than where we were with the pandemic announcement, in part because a lot of the transactions were already set up for the pandemic when you're looking back 5 weeks, but we're only selling 82% of what we did in 2020, which was the previous record low in 25 years. 2020 was also the record low in the past 10 years, and we're selling only about 3/4, and now 82% for this last week because of the pandemic. And the actual number is 1,680. So we're only selling 1,680. And you can see last year we sold 2,925 homes. So not quite half of what we sold last year, but darn close to it. And actually even very close to half of what we sold in 2021 at 3,200. 1,600 would be half of the 2021 record, and we're only 80 above the halfway mark. To me, that's real significant because in the stock market, when you have no buying activity, you have no depth to the market, and that allows the market to change. And then here are the 3 takeaways. You got the purple is inventory, so that's the supply side of it. And you can see we're way down here at about 75% of normal. Normal is the horizontal line at 100%, and you can see roughly 75%, maybe 77% of that normal. Moving on to offers accepted is even lower, probably about 64% of the normal volume of offers accepted. The volume of offers is way down. Because they're both way down, the DUIs, days on unsold inventory, which is the supply-demand balance, is slightly above, which is a slightly slower marketplace. But you're pretty darn close, and frankly, I would call it 100%, because what are you at? Maybe 102% or something like that? Basically having a normal, fast-paced Silicon Valley marketplace, but with half the inventory or 3/4 of the inventory and 2/3 of the number of offers accepted. Here is a summary of every indicator that we've looked at. Days on sold inventory, you can see we go from a high in the expensive areas in San Mateo County of 155 to a low, I think, of 15 days in Fremont, 15 and a half days in Fremont. The redder the color, the faster the marketplace. Days on market, this is the 75th percentile. So 75% of the sellers are selling their home, and the fastest one I'm seeing here is actually in Pleasanton at 11 days. You can see there is a slight difference. Pleasanton, 3/4 of the sellers are selling in 11 days versus Fremont at 12, but yet the pace of the marketplace is quite a bit slower at 27 days in Pleasanton versus 15, 16 days in Fremont. This is the 90 percentiles of sellers asking price reductions. So only 10% of the sellers are reducing their property value, their asking price, by 10.7% in Morgan Hill. Some of the areas there's no price reduction at all, and others are fairly small, like 0.04%, so less than 0.5% reduction in Dublin, Castro Valley, and Livermore. Sale price to list price, they're overbid, so this is what the buyers come in at. And even though there's almost no price reductions, the buyers are coming in and bidding the price up, not dramatically, not the large magnitudes that we saw before, except for in Alameda, Berkeley, and Oakland, where there are over 110%, 118% in Berkeley and Alameda, which is pretty unbelievable for given the overall market. But a lot of these areas are just a little bit over 100%, like about 102%. The frequency of overbidding, how common is the overbidding? And you can see the vast majority of these are roughly between 45 and 55% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. The appreciation since 2015, you can see, is basically from a low in Berkeley at 137% to a high of around 177%. And then over here is the sold price. You got three different numbers. You got the cheapest 10 percentile in a neighborhood, the median in the neighborhood, and the most expensive 90 percentile in that same micro market area. And the color here is assigned by the median. With that recap, we'll go back to the green URL as the root URL. You add the 2023 and you get to the live presentation Saturday mornings. If you add in H, the year 2023, the month 03, and the day 25, you get the handout, about 55-page handout of these power presentation. And if you put in the green URL and a year, month, date code, you get to the Ukutu archives. My contact information is on the bottom of this slide and every slide. And if anyone's got any questions, I'll answer them. If I don't have any questions, I'll go on and talk about the Greater Bay Area data, which is 13 counties in 5 regions. Not seeing any questions, I'll proceed. So now we're moving on to week 12, and we're going to be moving into adding in San Francisco Marin, which is the city's region. We're adding in the North Bay, which is Sonoma, Napa, Solano, Contra Costa. We're entering in the Central Valley, which is San Joaquin and Sacramento's, and we add in Central Coast, which is Santa Cruz and Monterey. Other than that, it stays the same: single-family homes, detached, and duets. There are a lot of row homes in San Francisco, which are classified as duets, and we're using a 5-week moving period, and we're using the 10-year reference of 2014 through 2013. Here's the number of active listings in each county. Not only do I have each county, I have the total. So here's Silicon Valley totals, and then I have the Bay Area, 9 counties that touch the Bay total. I do not have a Bay Area total. Then days of unsold inventory in the different regions, number of offers, the median days on market. I really don't like this index. I do like the 75th percentile. This is the long typical seller. How long is it taking them to sell? The seller's asking price, this is average reductions. You can see they're averaging 1-2% reductions in the different areas. The sale price to list price ratio, this is the buyer's overbidding. You can see a lot of the areas are real close to 100%. In fact, the lowest number I'm seeing is this 98.8% in Napa. The frequency of overbidding is basically around 50%, with, again, Napa being low at 31%, followed closely by San Joaquin at 32%. Then you have the 10 percentile, the median, and the 90 percentile in the different regions, and then the percent appreciation since 2015. Here's the active inventory in the different regions. The real takeaway is just look at the volume here in the Central Valley and North Bay, the gray and the yellow line. You're up here somewhere bouncing basically each year between 4,000 and 5,000. And this year, you're down here at 1,500. Those two regions have roughly about 1/3 the volume they typically have. Silicon Valley varies from about 2,000 to maybe 3,500 every year, roughly, or maybe even call it 1,500 to 3,500, 15 to 3,500. And now this year, you're down here at 1,500, but you're at 1,500 at a time when you're more in the 3,000 range. You're basically at the first quarter. So you're at 3,000. Here was a low year and you're about 2,500, a low year 2,500. So call it 2,500. So there's more years at 2,500, but now you're only at 1,500. So you're short by about 1,000 listings, which when you're talking about 2,500 is 20% of your inventory is absent. And then you come down to Santa Cruz, Monterey, as well as the cities, San Francisco and Marin, and they're typically right around 1,000 a lot of the time, and now they're around 500. So they have about half the inventory. The lack of inventory is very apparent. And this is in the greater San Francisco, San Jose, Sacramento Bay Area, basically 13 regions, 13 counties of Northern California close to the Bay. Now you look at the number of offers, you can see that 3 of the areas are very close together, around 1,700 offers accepted in each one of the 3 regions. You can see the numbers normally 2,200 to 2,500. So again, a large number of offers are missing. Again, in the smaller counties, San Francisco and Marin and Santa Cruz, again, the reduction's there, but not as much. You're somewhere typically around 500, and now you're probably about 350. You're off by about a third of your market. Here's your days on sold inventory. Because the number of offers and the number of active inventory are down, the days on sold inventory, the ratio between the two is actually down. In fact, if you look at this, many of these regions are having record low DUI. It's only Silicon Valley in the purple that is above where we were last year. So, in 2021, you're down here around 20 days, and now you're up here somewhere around 30 days, where if you go back and look at the orange, it was at about 40 days, and yeah, it's up a little bit, but what's it at? 48 days maybe. But if you come and look at sort of the blue region, the Central Coast, you're basically just up here at 60, and now you're down at some number like 54 or something like that. So you're actually lower. And then if you look at the yellow is up here at 50, and now you're down at something like 30. So a lot of the DUIs are lower, which is a faster marketplace, even though we have no inventory. It's the fact that you have no inventory and no offers to keep the market fast. Here's your 75th day percentile days on market. So the long typical seller. You can see in 2022, we were basically record low on durations across the board. You can see we skyrocketed up, but then we've turned around and we've come down. Silicon Valley is the lowest, followed by San Francisco, Marin, and then the other three are pretty clustered together up here around 70 days. Some of the areas it's taking 70 days, 2.5 months for 75% of the sellers to sell their property, but in Silicon Valley, it's not even taking a month. It's taking about 3 weeks for 75% of the sellers to sell. So there is quite a bit of difference in the time for the sellers to sell their properties. This is median days on market. I really don't like it. It bounces too much, so I'll skip over it. This is the sellers that are taking the largest price reductions, just so that you have some idea. You can see that even at the peak of the marketplace, 10% of the sellers were taking no reduction at all, or 90% of the sellers, less than 10% of the sellers were taking a price reduction. Right now, that number is somewhere around 87% of the sellers. So that says 13% of the sellers are taking a price reduction. 87% of the sellers are not taking any price reduction whatsoever. This is the average reduction. So this is a little bit more understanding what the market's doing in general. You can see that at the peak of the marketplace in early 2022, we were above 100%. So on average, the sellers they were actually raising their list price to above their original list price. And now we're down here. We're still really respectful at somewhere between 98 and 99%. So sellers are, on average, are taking just over 1% price reductions. This is the overbid magnitudes average sale price. So this is what the buyers come in and offer the seller to try to be the winning bidder. And you can see Central Valley has just skyrocketed right up. It's gone up dramatically in the last 2 weeks. Last week, I thought it was a potential error. I didn't remember to go looking for any errors, but this week is basically the same magnitude. It is possible there's one property that's off by a factor of 1,000. It would bring up the number, but when you look at average, which is one of the drawbacks, but I do a pretty good job of searching for that. I look for ratios. I'm not sure that would be able to escape, but it's a potential answer. You can see all the areas have gone up, but when one area in the Central Valley really standing out. But remember, the Central Valley also has a huge lack of inventory, so that's where you'd expect overbidding to occur. This is the median overbid, so that's the 50%. When the median is not up, in the case of Central Valley, and the average is way up, that tends to lead credibility to the fact that one listing has escaped through and is reported at $535 million instead of $535,000, which would cause the average to go way up and not cause the median to go up. And again, one of the reasons why when you're processing the data so quickly, you need so much. So when something escapes through the data point, you don't get blindsided by it. This is the smallest overbidding. So this is the sale price to list price ratio, and this is the percent the buyers that are offering the least. So in the Central Coast, you can see that the least the buyers are offering is 92.5%. In Central Valley, the least the buyers are offering is somewhere around 95.5%. So pretty tight. and, not dramatically down, but, an 8% or a 5% reduction on a house is pretty significant. Frankly, we're pretty price stable, but this is the buyers that are offering the biggest discounts. These could be the listings that were way overpriced. Then this is the largest overbidding. So this is the flip side. What buyers are paying the most? And so this would be the 90%. So anywhere from about 104%. Again, in the Central Valley this time, Central Coast would have been up here at about 107.5%. And then at Marin is the highest this week at about 118%. Silicon Valley is second highest at about 117%. How common is overbidding? Overbidding is more common in Silicon Valley than it is in the city, San Francisco and Marin. But you can see the pecking order is pretty strong, and basically between a third and 55% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. This is total appreciation. And again, you can see the huge run up just this last week in the Central Coast area. All the areas have turned around and gone up, but Central Coast is huge. Central Valley has been pretty flat. You can see the run down. And with that, we made it through week 12. We've talked about the route URLs before. Let's see if anyone's got any questions for me. I'm not seeing any unmuted mics. Have a good week. See everybody next week. Take care. Bye for now.